morning. My name is Dan Boudelier. I'm the IT director for the city of Portland.
Good morning. I'm Michael Dury, the IT director for Portland Public Schools.
And we're here today to talk a little bit about cybercrime and the most common types of cybercrime that we see. Now, to define it, cybercrime is basically any criminal act that involves the use of a computer to commit the crime. So that's fairly straightforward. Now, some facts on cybercrime. Criminal activity in cybercrime has now surpassed illegal drug trafficking. Someone's identity is stolen every 3 seconds. And without some form of protection on the computer, the average computer connected to the internet will become infected within 4 minutes. Now, the common types of cybercrime that we see, one is known as phishing. And phishing basically is when a number of spam emails go out with a link of some type and may even contain a message to try to entice you to click onto a link or onto a attachment. Phishing is the attempt by a hacker to gain some information about you or your network using a deceptive means.
That's true. And as you talk with organizations, bank organizations, even businesses, anybody that might have your credit or financial information, they will never request this information over an email. So if you receive an email and asking about personal identifying information, what we would call PII, that's not something you want to answer in an email. Typically, it might even be a phone call, but then you're reminded not to share that information until you can verify the person on the phone is actually who they're representing.
Right, and remember nowadays too, even with a telephone call, the caller ID can be spoofed. So you really don't know who you're talking to at the other end of the phone call. Identity theft, this is something that's been in the news a lot. Most recently in Maine, it was the Anthem data breach. The Anthem data breach resulted in 80 million people having their name, social security number, and their date of birth taken by some unknown group.
Including Portland, Maine School Department.
Yeah, as well as City of Portland employees. Now, the use of that, who knows? Most often, is to obtain fraudulent financial data that can lead to, credit cards. And we were discussing earlier, one of my friends went to file his income tax only to find someone else had already filed using his ID. So they received his tax return.
I had a situation with my home computer where I was having issues with it, and I went into the manufacturer's website and selected an icon they had for technical support. You know, it took several hours online, and they went all through my computer, and they supposedly fixed a whole bunch of stuff on it. And then they told me, you know, we're going to also put on this internet security thing for you. 3 months later, I got a phone call from somebody saying, we have you on file, and there's some compromised programs in your computer, and we need to go in and fix it, and it's only going to cost you $140. So at this point, I knew that I had done something very wrong and that I needed help. So my husband knew a young man that worked on computers, so he took it to this young man. He got some spyware off my computer, and I think he added some security to it as well. And we paid him $30. So now at this point, it's $175. And unbeknownst to myself, my computer still wasn't security, tampering free. I still had security issues. So I ended up bringing it to another man that I know who wiped my computer and rebooted all of my drives and also found spyware on it. That didn't cost me anything, thank God, but I've learned a lot through that. Contact Dell, make sure it's Dell.com. The worst thing about it is not that it was $145 or even $175. It's just having that control taken away from you because they're stealing from you. They stole that from me, and then they came back and wanted more.
Yeah, ransomware is very prevalent, and what we'll see with products like that is generally, and I'll back up a little bit, sometimes the result you see from a search engine isn't true. If I'm running, or if I've developed a criminal website, I can look at the things you were searching for and say yes to every one of them. So it's a false positive that my website has what you were looking for. If I can fool you into clicking a link, I can launch ransomware. Most of those that we see are launched from outside the U.S. There are actually criminal servers. There is actually a criminal cloud where if I wanted to commit cybercrime, I can rent the software to do it. I can rent the server to host it on, and it will all be outside the reach of U.S. law. Generally, I think the most important thing with ransomware, it is dangerous. It will encrypt all of your files. Interestingly enough, it doesn't touch Windows files. It wants to make sure that your PC is still in working condition so you can pay the ransom. So it won't touch that. If you back up your computer, that is probably the best protection. If you have a recent backup, just don't make the mistake of leaving the backup device plugged in. Ransomware, when it begins its attack, will look at everything on the C drive and then go to any other network drive you're currently attached to. So if you're on a large network that may have 3 or 4 network drives, it will start out on your laptop or desktop computer, but then it will work progressively up the chain to anything you have access to. And that was what had happened recently with one of the, I think it was Penobscot Bay Sheriff's Department.
Was it Penobscot? I thought it was further up.
Perhaps, yeah. But there was a region of northern Maine where all it took was one individual clicking on the wrong link to launch the attack.
Where they basically compromised the police department software and had all the information, and then held the police department at ransom. Yeah, that's something that's so new. That's one of those things where, it's hard to figure out what you're supposed to do, because I can see those police departments not wanting any of that information to go public. But at the same time, it's hard to picture a police department, giving ransom to somebody who's holding them like that. It's definitely something that we've never seen before in this country. I've never heard of it until recently. But it's one of those things where the legislature is trying to keep up with the new scams that are coming down the pike when it comes to technology and cybercrime. That's just something that I don't think anybody's ever even thought of before. They'll come up with something that's going to prevent it, but by the time they do that, these people have probably moved on to something else. But as of right now, it's something incredible.
Staying ahead of hackers is probably the most difficult thing to do, because there's always someone out there that's developing the next thing that nobody in the security field has even really thought of as a vulnerability. Hackers tend to possibly not have jobs a lot of times, or hacking is their job. So a lot of times, they're out there really searching for those bugs and different exploits that they can do that the people that write the code haven't necessarily thought of as potential, vulnerabilities or bugs that would cause, serious damage.
Basic things you can do to protect against these scams. One of the most important things is if you receive an email from someone you don't know, and that email asks you to click on a link, please don't do it. That's one of the most common techniques, is to try to get you to click on a link provided in email. Anytime you see information that sounds urgent from someone you don't know, it could be information of, for reasons unknown, they want to share some financial wealth with you. Be very, very suspicious of that. Those are common ways. And many people, especially the older folks, are very gullible. They're very trusting. So we have multiple levels of defense within our network.
Right, and just to carry on with that, industry, it's known as the onion approach, right? You peel back the one skin of an onion. So we have some tools at some layers, then we have other tools at other layers to actually examine all the informational packets that's coming in and out of the network as well. So these different tools that we have at these onion layers do different specific processes, that the main goal is to prevent the malware, to prevent any exposure of the organization to the outside world, to somebody who might want to exploit it.
Yep.
We've taken a layered approach. So we have at the endpoint facing the internet, our firewall has filtering built into that, so that if there's someone downloading a package, an executable, a zip file, whatever it may be, watching a flash video, because those can sometimes have viruses in them as well, we make sure that that's scanned on the way in. And then again, once it's downloaded, we have another layer that will scan it again to make sure that, you know, anything that isn't caught in the first layer might be caught in the second layer of defense.
I provide my clients with a number of services in the data security area. My work generally relates to businesses more than it does individual consumers. So I am usually advising businesses on what they need to do to protect data and what they need to do in the event of a breach. So for example, I have designed and drafted information security programs for my clients that have included, you know, everything from administrative capabilities, such as policies and procedures around training employees, around what you do with the data you have electronically, what you do with the data you have in paper, technical specifications in terms of information security on the computers, and so on and so forth. I have also helped a number of clients when their data has been breached, whether that's, in some cases it's a hacking incident from outside, in some cases it's an employee leaving a laptop somewhere that contains personally identifiable information on it. So we will advise clients on all of the various data breach notification obligations that they may have, which depends on where the individuals are from. It could be, you could be dealing with 50 plus different laws if there are individuals involved from every state, or it could be a more finite group of laws if you're just dealing with a couple of states. We will help prepare the PR pieces and prep clients for what they need to say to their consumers and customers, and so on and so forth. But the place that I touch data security law in primarily is in vendor contracts. So I do a lot of technology-related deals and outsourcing arrangements where one party is hiring another party to provide services where the vendor will have personally identifiable information and other confidential data sitting on its systems. It may be processing that data, it may be maintaining that data, it may have customer-facing services. And in those events, you need to build in all kinds of appropriate information security protections into the contract so that the vendor has certain obligations with respect to what they need to do with that information, and so that the vendor incurs the liability, or the lion's share of the liability, if the information is stolen based on a breach on the vendor's system, and so on and so forth.
And that's the thing. I mean, I can only imagine the big kind of organized crime, and I think that's the new organized crime, are these cyber criminals. You know, it's not, you know, we still have, you know, what you see on TV, I guess, with mafia and things like that, but I think a lot of even those groups have probably branched out into doing cybercrime, because really it's probably the hardest crime to try to track these people down. You know, it's a lot of, and there are ways to hide yourself. You know, there's so many things that you can do to try to hide where you are and what you're doing, who you are. It's pretty incredible. And if these people could use their powers and brain power for good, I think we'd be living in a much better world right now. So.
Run only as fast as I can, but my mind is free to sail across terabytes of reality, to soar above a pixel land in a rocket ship. The 9999 made of megabits. Ladies and gentlemen, leave the world and bring your friends. Step inside and close the door. Shut it out, plug it in, press start and we're flying. No use for your walls, it's love. 'Cause we build digital castles in the sky.